Welcome to the Explainer. You know, every government has a playbook for managing its economy, a set of tools to create jobs, control prices, and drive growth. That playbook is called Fiscal Policy, and today we're going to break it down using the real-world strategy of India.
So let's start with the big question. How exactly does a government steer its economy? I mean, when a recession hits or inflation suddenly starts to spike, what can it actually do to get things back on track? Well, the answer lies in this powerful toolkit it has.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll nail down what fiscal policy actually is. Then we'll look at the two main ways to use it. After that, we'll dive right into India's current game plan, check out the specific tools they're using, and finally, take a look at the scorecard to see how it's all working out.
Okay, let's dive right in. When we talk about fiscal policy, what are we really talking about? At its absolute heart, fiscal policy really just boils down to two main levers the government can pull: how much money it brings in through taxes and how much money it spends. That's it. It's a constant balancing act between those two things to try and steer the entire economy.
And it's kind of wild when you think about it. Just by tweaking those two simple levers, taxing and spending, a government can influence huge parts of the economy. It can impact the total demand for everything, it can encourage us to save or invest more, and it can even change how income is spread out across society.
So depending on what the economy's doing, governments usually take one of two basic stances. A really good way to think about it is like driving a car. Sometimes you need to hit the gas pedal, and other times you got to pump the brakes. And here they are side by side. If the economy feels sluggish, the government hits the gas with an expansionary policy. It spends more, or maybe cuts taxes to get more money flowing and create jobs. But if the economy is getting too hot and inflation is becoming a problem, it hits the brakes with a contractionary policy, spending less and taxing more to cool things off. All right, so that's the theory, but let's see how this all plays out in the real world. We're going to take a look at the game plan for the world's fifth largest economy, India.
Now, this official statement really lays out a delicate balancing act. The government talks about fiscal consolidation, which is just a formal way of saying they're trying to tighten their belts and reduce their debt. But, and this is the crucial part, they want to do this while still pushing for growth that benefits everybody. It's like trying to gently tap the brakes without stalling the engine.
And this number right here is their key target. It's the fiscal deficit, which is simply the shortfall when a government spends more money than it brings in through taxes. India is aiming to keep that gap to just 4.3% of its total economic output, its GDP. That's a really clear signal of their commitment to financial discipline. This table basically shows us the government's roadmap, what they call a glide path, for getting their finances in order. You can see the main fiscal deficit is planned to shrink just a little. The other numbers, like the primary deficit, that's the shortfall before they even pay interest on old debt, are also trending down. So this isn't a sudden slam on the brakes, it's a gradual, planned slowdown of new borrowing to keep things stable for the long haul.
So you might be wondering, how does a government actually hit these targets? It's one thing to set goals. It's another to have the right tools. Let's look at three key policies in India's toolkit.
First up is a really smart spending initiative. But instead of just spending broadly, the government is getting targeted, using incentives to boost a key area, domestic manufacturing.
It's called the Production-Linked Incentive, or PLI scheme. The idea is simple. The government literally pays companies to produce more goods inside India. This is a huge priority because it creates stable jobs and makes the country less reliant on imports. And wow, the impact has been massive, attracting huge investment, boosting exports, and creating almost 1.5 million jobs. This is a textbook example of a targeted expansionary policy.
Okay, so let's flip to the other side of the equation, revenue. A key part of that fiscal consolidation we mentioned is making sure the government's income is steady and growing.
India's nationwide goods and services tax, the GST, has become an absolute revenue engine. Just look at the collections. They're showing consistent growth year after year. This simplified tax system is a huge help in making sure the government has the revenue it needs to fund its spending and manage that deficit.
But fiscal policy isn't just about big industries and tax revenues. It can also be an incredibly powerful tool to advance specific social goals.
Through a practice called gender-responsive budgeting, India is specifically tracking how much of its spending benefits women. And why does this matter? Because we know that greater economic empowerment for women leads to stronger growth for everyone. That share has now reached an all-time high of nearly 10% of the entire national budget, a clear example of how you can use fiscal policy to drive real social change.
So, with this game plan and these tools in action, what's the bottom line? Let's check the scorecard and see how this strategy of balancing the books while targeting growth is actually playing out.
The data here paints a pretty compelling picture. The economy is growing at a robust 7.4%, yet retail inflation is remarkably low at just 1.7%. When you combine that with strong investment growth and a low trade deficit, it really suggests the policy mix is working. They're fostering growth without letting the economy overheat.
So the official outlook is optimistic. They're banking on strong demand at home and ongoing reforms to keep the momentum going. But they're also realistic, acknowledging that in a connected world, global uncertainties and trade tensions are always a potential risk to the plan.
So in the end, a country's fiscal policy is so much more than just numbers on a page. It's a statement of its priorities. It's a blueprint for the future. And as we've seen, India's current blueprint is all about financial discipline, smart, targeted investment, and building a more resilient economy for the years to come.